Good afternoon, everyone. We're convening the Environment Committee public hearing on Friday, March 15th, 2024. It's 12:01. We are in room 2B of the Legislative Office building. This will be our last public hearing for the 2024 session. Again, thank you everyone for attending. That being said, Representative Callahan.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for showing up to testify. Just for clarification, as I've said in other public hearings, if we're not all in the room at any particular time, it doesn't mean we're not paying attention. Some of us have multiple committee meetings or stepped out to use the restroom or eat, but some of these go along, and that's why sometimes we're not always here. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Callahan. Seeing no other individuals in the room to make comments, we're going to go right to the public hearing and our sign-up sheet. The first person to testify is the Commissioner of Deep, Katie Dykes. And crew.
Good morning. I'm Katie Dykes, Commissioner at the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, and so appreciate the opportunity the committee's afforded for DEEP to provide oral testimony to supplement the written that we've submitted on several of the bills. We have filed written testimony on 6 of the bills on today's agenda. I'm happy to speak very briefly to them. I would say we're passing around a report that DEEP recently issued, launching our 20 by 26 initiative to improve the efficiency, transparency, and predictability of the permitting processes that DEEP undertakes. This initiative is actually the second iteration of efforts around performance improvement and enhancement for permitting. In 2019, we launched the 20 by 20 initiative, setting 20 performance goals for streamlining permitting that we would achieve by the end of 2020. And so this report that you have here actually provides a summary of the accomplishments on those first 20 goals that we set back in 2019, as well as details 16 new goals that we've set for the agency that we want to hit by the end of 2026. And so we are going to, so we're also soliciting from the public and from stakeholders ideas for 4 additional goals that we could establish as part of this initiative. There's a range of different goals that we've included in this effort, but the one that is really germane to the Senate Bill 189 is a goal that we've set to improve the on-time completion of our completion rate for our critical permit applications. When I started as commissioner in 2019, we did not really have benchmarked expected timeframes for how long a permit process should take. And so we actually inventoried all 125 different permitting processes. And depending on the level of complexity, the public hearing or public participation requirements that are involved with different types of permits, as well as in some cases, federal consultations that are required, the timeframes are different for different types of permits. We have over 125 different types of permits that DEEP is charged with implementing. And so we've set those benchmark timeframes for all of those different permit types to enable applicants and the stakeholders and impacted communities that participate in permitting processes to have a sense of predictability about how long it'll take to get an answer from DEEP. And then we established a public dashboard that is on our website where we track how we're doing in meeting those benchmark timeframes for all of the permitting permit types. And so based on that dashboard, that obviously is helpful to for us to be transparent to the public about how we're doing in meeting those timeframes, but also it's a management tool for us to then be able to look at different permitting programs where we might be not meeting our expected timeframes, so that we can look at things that we can do to help address that. And those include, in some cases, we'll be able to adjust how we do those permits to be able to do them faster, moving some types of permits from an individual permit that requires individual application review to a general permit where we identify activity that is approvable, and then that streamlines the process for an applicant who fits within that framework to be able to get a quicker answer. Even permit by rule is something that we've done. It requires us to develop regs and have the regs review committee approve, but in some cases we've been able to shift to something where the permit applicant takes on the responsibility to ensure that they're meeting the targets and compliance, and no application approval is required by DEEP. So these are examples of things that we've done. The other thing that we know is, of course, sometimes we see a spike in activity where we get a lot of applications that may come in for a certain type of activity. We've offered to this committee technical fixed bills from year to year, and appreciate the committee's willingness to entertain those. Sometimes those include technical fixes that are helping us to be able to move permit decisions faster. And then finally, another category of things that we are assessing to enhance on-time completion is staffing. We saw during, two things. When we launched the 20 by 20 initiative and this dashboard, of course, in 2022, thank goodness that we had this in place, we had a retirement cliff, and we said goodbye to more than 100 experienced staff across our agency. We were able to hire some tremendously accomplished new employees to come in, but we've lost some of our institutional knowledge in some of these complex permitting programs. And so we, not surprisingly, saw some of our on-time completion rates, were not as high as they were before, but we're starting to rebound from that as our new employees are getting better oriented. So that just shows you, of course, that the workforce component is directly related to our ability to meet on-time completion rates. And so I'm hopeful that as we or I expect as we continue to work towards these 90% on-time completion rate for our permit applications goal, which is goal 2 of 20 by 26, it may illuminate places where we would benefit from having some increased staffing to meet the desire I see in this bill, which is to be able to issue decisions in a faster time frame. But there's lots more to say here. I do want to note that of those 125 plus permitting programs, a number of them are, of course, derived from state statutory requirements that require people to apply for permits, but a lot of them are permits programs that we are implementing on behalf of the federal government with delegated authority from the federal government. So some of the timeframes and the processing procedures are spelled out and have to be approved by our federal agency that's delegating this authority to us. And so one of our biggest concerns with Senate Bill 189 is that it could actually jeopardize the ability for DEEP to continue to implement federally delegated permitting programs. And then that would have applicants in the position of having to look to Washington to get their applications approved on time. So anyway, this is there's a lot of detail behind how to achieve permit decisions in a timely fashion. Hopefully this bill is signaling the interest of the committee in enhancing our dialogue and understanding about what is impacting our ability to issue decisions in a timely way. But I appreciate the opportunity to speak further on that. Of course, we have written testimony on a number of other bills, but I've gone at length on this particular one because this is such an important initiative for the department, and we're very committed to its success. And I just wanted to make the committee aware of this initiative. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions on any of the other bills that we've submitted testimony on, or anything the committee may wish to inquire about.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to start the ball rolling. So based on the assessment that you did from the success of 2020 for 2020. Has the backlog for permits gone down? Have you heard feedback from individuals that might be saying something like, wow, I expected that to take longer than it normally does? I mean, how are we doing with affecting any backlog?
So we have a lot of successes to share. When I started as the commissioner, with the 20 by 20 initiative, we determined that we had 331 permit decisions that had been pending with the department. This was in 2019, that were older than 2017. And so we made one of our 20 by 20 goals was to reduce that backlog of permit decisions while also meeting on-time completion rates for the new stuff coming in the door. So we were able to reduce that backlog by 45%. Now in this 20 by 26 effort, we are making backlog reduction a permanent goal. So not just saying, let's look at all this stuff in this pre-2017, file cabinet, but actually we're going to say everything on a 5-year look back, 5-year rolling basis is going to be now in the backlog category. And we have a goal to ensure that backlog reduction target, we have a continuing target around backlog reduction. And some of these are, permit renewals. The standards may have changed since the initial permit was issued. In some cases, it may be that the applicant is not active anymore. So there's lots of different reasons why certain permit decisions may be lingering for some time. But I'll say that we found tremendous. I mean, you asked about the feedback that we've received. One thing that I also want to highlight as far as a tool and a solution that's been really helpful for our agency is utilizing IT tools. So to ensure increased timeliness and reduce the amount of time that DEEP is spending on a permit. We established, you're familiar with the National Diversity Database. DEEP has responsibilities for threatened and endangered species review. And so through 20 by 20, we launched an online portal where applicants can actually get an immediate answer about whether their project will require an NDDB review. And that's cut significantly the number of NDDB applications that DEEP staff have been reviewing. The benefit of all of this streamlining, by the way, is it enables DEEP staff to be focused more on the high impact, more complex applications and issues that actually will more materially affect environmental outcomes. And that's certainly the case with NDDB. Another example that I would share is with respect to some of our regulations that we've been able to move forward. The spill reporting regulations are something that we committed to finally getting done under 20 by 20. Prior to adopting those regulations, all spills there was no de minimis standard for the types of spills that had to be reported to the department. And so once we put the spill reporting regulations, we were able to identify a certain category of spills with minimal impacts that we no longer had to receive reports for. And that cut in half the amount of reporting that had to come to DEEP, and it also freed up our staff time to focus on those types of spills that have a more of a significant impact to the environment. And the list goes on, but I think those are examples of either IT tools like the NDDB database or regulatory changes that have helped us to better optimize where we're spending our time and applicants' time in the permitting process.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I have a final question, but it's not about the permits bill. It's about 5349, the pollen count. I understand from your testimony, DEEP doesn't have the ability to perform what is requested, but I'm wondering if you'd be willing to work with Dr. Mitchell, since I believe there was an existing pollen count happening in Waterbury Hospital. So maybe you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You could just kind of fix it. So
yes. So thank you. No, we don't certainly the availability of, analysis to look at pollen counts is important. We know how it impacts public health. It's a public health issue, probably as much as an environment issue. And the loss of that capability at Waterbury Hospital is, we acknowledge that. It's just not, this is not something that DEEP has done in the past and or are resourced to do. So I think it's sort of a resource question. One thing we were discussing is like where we might be able to work on trying to find grant funding, maybe from our federal partners or working with public health to see if there are resources that might become available so we could continue to support entities like Waterbury Hospital to continue to do this function. But again, it comes down to sort of a resource question, but we'd be happy to work with the committee. Certainly, Dr. Mitchell has been a great friend of the agency, part of our Equity and Environmental Justice Advisory Council. So,
Thank you. Did you want to say something, Trace?
I'm just happy to add,
Uh,
we have been working closely with the team, and just for reference, our staff that operates the statewide air quality monitoring network, that's their primary focus. But I think it's been a nice collaboration to use the expertise associated with, as you get into measuring pollen, there's a lot of similarities to how we conduct our air quality monitoring. So certainly within our existing resources, our technical staff have been, more than happy to share that expertise that they've gained over the years from operating a statewide network.
Thank you, Tracy. That's it for me. Anyone else have any comments? Senator Lopes.
Thank you. If you could elucidate a little bit more on Transfer Act, release-based regs, kind of a big issue for New Britain.
So we're really excited about the progress on release-based. We've and certainly that dates back to the legislature passing the statute in 2021 that authorized some changes to the Transfer Act, and also directed or authorized the department to develop regulations that for a release-based program that could ultimately replace the Transfer Act if those regulations are moved forward and approved by the Legislative Regulations Review Committee. The legislation also established a working group of practitioners and experts in this space who have been investing countless hours to provide input to DEEP on the draft of these regulations. And we have shared a draft of the regulations with the working group, received feedback very recently from the working group members. And we're now reviewing all that feedback so we can work to advance the regulations to notice and comment for the public. This is going to be it's a massive undertaking to shift from the Transfer Act framework to the release-based program. We're very committed to getting all of the details of this complex regulation right. But as this has been a long and complex process, it's important to reflect on what this is about and why we're doing it. Connecticut was one of the first states to adopt a regulatory framework to govern the cleanup of contaminated sites. That was the Transfer Act in the 80s. And, I think it was a great effort and its time, but I think it has proven to be not the preferred framework that most states have moved forward with. We are one of only 2 states that has a Transfer Act type approach. The release-based approach is just generally much more flexible, much more equitable and comprehensive in how the requirements are assigned and to property owners to clean up. Essentially it shifts to the burden instead of under the Transfer Act. Certain types of property owners have a very significant requirement under the Transfer Act to investigate and their sites and prove that there's no contamination on the site. And the responsibility to do that only incurs at the time of the sale of the property. It's resulted in more than 3,000 properties being in limbo, many of them in communities like New Britain in our legacy sites that we hope under a release-based framework can come back to productive reuse. So we think this will be a huge improvement for the state, and especially for cities that have a lot of our industrial legacy brownfields concentrated within their borders. If are able to move to a release-based framework, so we've made that one of our goals. I do want to assure that we think that we're committed to moving these regulations forward, with some urgency, but we're very much, I want to underscore, committed to engaging all the parties, all the stakeholders, especially our working group members who have contributed their expertise, because we've got to get this right. And so we're very grateful for all their input and continue to digest all the feedback that we received.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Senator. Any other comments or questions for the Commissioner? Representative Callahan.
Thank you, Commissioner, for being here today, and I really appreciate members of the DP staff. It's good to see you all. I appreciate you coming. I've looked at your written testimony. At this point, I don't have any questions, but I appreciate the materials provided to help us make the right decisions on these bills. If I do end up with some questions, I hope you don't mind me contacting your office. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Callahan. Representative D'Amico.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner, for coming in along with your team, as always. So I just had a couple of questions about a couple of bills on our hearing agenda today. You referenced both of them. I just wanted to get a little better explanation. So the first one is Senate Bill 189 about the issuance of permits. So I appreciate, and I have always appreciated your position that many of these permits are complicated and therefore they take much more time than the 60-day, potential requirement would call for. So I appreciate that. I also appreciate and was not aware, but do appreciate your comments in your oral as well as written testimony having to do with federal constraints, not wanting to lose the opportunity to do things that the feds have given the state the permission to do. So that's important as well. I just wanted to ask you to give a little more detail about, I seem to remember in previous years when we've talked about permitting, and I think you referenced it in your oral comments a few minutes ago, that along the way, do you make it a practice of keeping the applicants informed of what the status of their permit and what needs to be done and what still needs to be fulfilled? I would just like a little explanation of that.
Actually, one of the outcomes of the 20 by 20 initiative that I think was probably the most popular is that we established a concierge office. So we established a permitting concierge function at DEEP. Obviously, with 125 different permitting processes, this means that depending on the permit, of course, there's staff the staff assigned are usually a primary contact for the applicant to inquire about status and so on. But we also recognize how important it is to have kind of a front door and a central point of contact that could be available for applicants as well as stakeholders. Actually, legislators and municipal leaders are frequent clients of the concierge, checking in what's happening with this project, what's the status of the permit, what's going on. And so by creating this permitting concierge, we created a single point of contact that folks could reach out to inquire about status. The other benefit of the concierge is that we really encourage folks to take advantage of the concierge if they're just getting started with the project and they want to know what are all the permits that I'm going to need from DEEP, how long are these things going to take, especially if they're going to need more than one permit. The concierge will bring together all the respective permitting programs into one meeting to sit down with the permit applicant so that you can triage the timeline and with the sequence of the different permit processes. And then the concierge can serve as that sort of communicator between program staff, among program staff when it involves multiple departments, as well as with the applicant. And so the feedback, the emails that I've gotten from folks who've been through the concierge process, just saying, you know, how appreciative they are of the communication, the transparency, has been extraordinary. And so in fact, we've been contacted by other states who are saying, you know, what's this concierge thing that you created, and how could we replicate that? So it's been very, very helpful for us, and I think it's been well received by the applicants. And we are expanding the concierge as part of 20 by 26 to have a specific focus on helping small businesses as well as municipal leaders be aware of the concierge services. They can help take advantage of that. And there's materials in this report about how to access the concierge.
I appreciate that. So just to make it clear, you do not favor this current bill as currently written.
I do not.
Okay, I knew that, but I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that. Okay. Mr. Chair, ask one more question if I could.
Please.
Actually, two more questions if I could.
One.
Okay, fair enough. So I saw in your, now we're going to go to Senate Bill 289 about vegetation management. So I saw in your written testimony, you referenced that we already have we did a vegetation management study. Did I read that right?
Yes. Mason?
Yes, good morning, Representative Mason Trumbull, Deputy Commissioner for Environmental Conservation at DEEP. So a couple things, you asked about a report or a study. So 2 years ago, the legislature passed a bill that required DEEP to implement a new hazard tree removal policy. We did that. I think that new policy has been incredibly successful. It's worked well over the past 2 years. Some of the major changes of that policy include the better public transparency and engagement. So we post our hazard tree removal projects on our website 14 days before they occur. We also post signage in the park where they're about to occur. Those also go up 14 days. We have an email address. We also have a new mechanism called the heritage tree process that allows us to flag trees that may have specific cultural value, et cetera. That legislation also asked DEEP to submit a report of all the trees that we've removed in our parks over the past year. So that's an annual report that we submit to the committee. That I think you do have access to that on the CGA website, and I'm glad to follow up with another copy of that. But that report does include a listing of every tree that's been removed in a state park over the past year.
We have some copies that we brought today too, so we can share that report. But our concern is that this bill would disrupt, you know, we've made a lot of progress, I think, in implementing the vegetation management process that we worked on with the committee 2 years ago. And so our concern is that this duplicates or would disrupt, I think, what, you know, the process that we've embraced and saw, we think is going well.
So clearly somebody doesn't like this policy. Otherwise, this bill wouldn't be before us, I suspect.
Well, we like it.
Okay, good to know. All right. I guess we'll talk further, but thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Representative D'Amico. Representative Palm.
Good afternoon. Could you explain to me just briefly, what is the relationship, the working relationship between DEEP and the DOT when it comes to tree cutting? I know you guys aren't responsible for what's going on along the highways, but I believe that as you are refining your protocol for quote unquote vegetation management, it seems as though the DOT is on another planet when it comes to this. Can anybody address that, please? I realize that you're not with DOT, but
Yeah, you can imagine, we're not here to speak on behalf of the DOT and to their programs and processes. We can speak to what we've been doing with our program, but as far as our role with respect to DOT, do you have anything else you wanted to share there?
Yeah, I think the commissioner said it well. The types of projects that we do in our state forests and our state parks are very different from the types of projects that the DOT does along the public roadways. So we do share some. I think we do share some working groups with them on some vegetation management. I can get back to you on some of the specific ways we collaborate. But the projects themselves are relatively distinct.
I do understand that. Thank you. I'm not asking you to speak for them. I guess my question is really very simple. Are you guys in touch with each other about this?
We do work together with DOT on a number of projects. And we have worked with them collaboratively on the issues regarding vegetation management. The specifics of each project, it really depends on the project that you're referencing. So I'm glad to provide more information on specific ways that we collaborate with DOT.
So I thank you. I would appreciate it because I find the information sorely lacking when it comes to their protocol. So it would be helpful to hear from anybody on how they make their decisions. Thank you. I realize you're not responsible for it, but if you could help enlighten me, I would be grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Palm. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none. Commissioner? Oh, I'm sorry. Representative Baumgartner, don't go anywhere yet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much, Commissioner, for your testimony this morning. A question regarding the vegetation management. Certainly want to align my remarks with our Vice Chair. One fear that I have is just with the clear cutting of trees. Once that happens, a lot of especially invasive species proliferate on those thoroughfares. And like many of us, we represent districts, many of the folks on this committee represent districts that have state parks that are adjacent to these state roads. And one fear I have is that ultimately those invasive plants or trees will start leaching into our state forests and state parks if left unabated. I guess my question to you is how, kind of factoring that into this discussion, if you sort of have any particular thoughts on that and ways to mitigate the spread of invasive species into our state parks from our highways.
Yeah, I'll just say as a general matter, like, there's a lot of different factors that we're balancing when we're looking at vegetation management. And certainly, as you mentioned, around invasives, that's one factor. I think when we're talking about the hazard tree removal, that was the subject of our, or is the focus of our, the process that the committee put in place, and that we're reporting to the committee on every year. Those are trees that we're removing because of a public safety concern, where we have people visiting parks or especially in campgrounds. We have instances, tragic instances of people being injured or even killed as a result of trees failing. And with the acceleration of climate change, we have more invasive pests. We have periods of drought, things that are stressing our tree species. And so that's caught as well as storm damage. So the universe that we're really focused on with our hazard tree removal is primarily addressing how can we continue to maintain the accessibility of our parks for the public, whether it's addressing dead or dying trees, or cleaning up after a storm so that we can quickly try to reopen a park to the public safely. And we're doing so in a way that to try to, again, with the primary impetus to be able to keep the public safe. And so we're, of course, addressing invasives and all these other things are part of that as well. And something that we're, very focused on. I don't know if Jenny Dixon is with us as well, who's our chief of our Bureau of Natural Resources. So Jenny, you should supplement.
Hi, sure. One of the things that we do pretty regularly is work with the Environmental Services Unit of DOT. We've worked with them on a number of conservation projects, but we also do work with them on a number of their cutting projects. It's not unusual for that part of DOT to set restrictions on contractors involving invasive plants. Usually they will also implement programs that are targeted at monitoring for invasives and treating them within a certain time frame after construction projects or large roadwork projects occur. So they are working on building in those kinds of safety measures. They particularly concentrate on that when they abut state lands that are, parks, forests, wildlife management areas, things like that. We also work with them on a regular basis to adjust some of those cutting schedules for some of our rare species, plants, animals, things like that as well, so that we can make sure that the habitats are protected, as is the safety of the roadways that they're working on.
Thank you. And just a quick pivot to another invasive species in our state parks, eastern part of our state, these rogue roving swine. Obviously, it's becoming a bigger issue. I know the proposed bill would create a working group, but in the time being, it's an issue that will continue to proliferate and affect not only more towns within Eastern Connecticut, but also starting to encroach on our westerly neighbor in Rhode Island. And again, left unabated, could have very significant impacts to the local ecology and just quality of life for residents in Eastern Connecticut. So I guess my question to Deep would be, in the short time, while we're continuing to work on this issue, what are things that can be done to immediately address this crisis?
I think one of the things that we have been working on with our colleagues in Department of Agriculture, and the challenge for us is that they have jurisdiction on these issues, is to provide some technical assistance for them, to connect them with other partners in federal agencies who can help address those kinds of issues. USDA Wildlife Services is an organization that specializes in dealing with livestock issues when they've sort of gone on the lam, for lack of a better way of putting it. And so we have connected Department of Agriculture with some of those experts who can help work on the issue in Sterling and prevent things like that from happening in the future. It can get complicated jurisdictionally sometimes, but I know that's one that both the Department of Agriculture and DEEP share a keen interest in. You know, us from a more habitat standpoint and the impacts to native species, and also disease impacts to native species, and certainly Department of Agriculture, because they need to make sure that domestic animals are not running around in the landscape. So it's a complicated issue, but we are trying to work through it, and we're taking it very seriously, because certainly situations like that are complex and troubling for a whole bunch of reasons.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Baumgartner. I think I smell bacon. Any other questions or comments? Yeah. Hey. Thank you, Commissioner, for your testimony.
Random thing I've heard all day.
Next is Representative Lanu.
I appreciate that bacon comment right before lunch. Good afternoon, as it is now. Chairman Dresko, Chairman Lopes, Ranking Member Callahan, Ranking Member Senator Harding. Thank you so much, members of the committee. I'm here with Voluntown First Selectman Tracy Hansen to speak in very enthusiastic support of HB 5350. An act concerning the enforcement of boating laws on bodies of water near the Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and New York borders. Voluntown is home to one of our best natural resources here in the state of Connecticut, Beach Pond. We have Finn Beach. We have beautiful pine trees that are along the pond itself. The sunsets at Beach Pond is absolutely amazing. And we want to encourage you all to check it out, as many do. It's a great place for great recreation for all of us. Unfortunately, in recent years, really since 2015, there's been a boat launch. This is an interstate body of water. Part of it is in Connecticut in Voluntown. The other part is in the state of Rhode Island. Rhode Island being undeveloped, we have gotten some riffraff with jet skis and boats, where people are coming into the Connecticut side, being very aggressive with kayakers, with people who are swimming in the water, posing some dangerous situations. Our law enforcement hands are tied as far as pursuing with that invisible line, not knowing exactly where the Rhode Island side is. This bill would allow for that reciprocity to be able to pursue into Rhode Island. And I'm going to turn the mic over to First Selectman Hansen to give you a little more background on the problem and situation. First Selectman.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time today. And thank you for hearing my frustration in this issue. It's been going on even before I was first selectman here. In 2015, Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management, Rhode Island DEM, put a boat launch in on the Rhode Island side of the pond. In my written testimony, I included a little map of the pond, if you have that to see. The Rhode Island piece is small. But they have 20 parking spots at their boat launch. The Connecticut boat launch is on the other side of the pond, and that has 25 parking spots. Both of these boat launches were put in by a federal grant for fishing and boating. So the purpose of the both boat launches are for boating. Our main issue in Voluntown for the residents and for the visitors, because Beach Pond is a tourist destination for both Rhode Island and Connecticut. The Rhode Island side of the pond is Arcadia State Park. They don't have residents on that side, so all the complaints that Rhode Island gets are from by residents in Voluntown and also from visitors. The main problem has been watercraft violations, mostly from jet skis. So that's why we're here today. To have voting
keep going.
enforcement. Okay, the jet skis are causing problems. They mostly come in from the Rhode Island side, and Beach Pond is known on the Rhode Island side. It's like the Wild West of the jet ski area. They're not coming in registered or having proper operating licenses. But the issue has been enforcing this. DEM has not gotten out on the pond. They did during COVID. I used to call them all the time and they were getting out there, but they were only on the little piece of Rhode Island side because they can't enforce on the Connecticut side. I get the Connecticut State Police and NCON out there on the Connecticut side, but again, the jet skiers seem to know that where this invisible line is on the pond, and they move to the Rhode Island side when they feel that they're going to be in trouble. We actually have the Coast Guard out there once a year because they do have jurisdiction, unknown to them when I called during COVID and said, can you please come patrol my pond? And they were like, yeah, we don't do that. Then they called me back an hour later and apologized and said, oh yeah, we do that. So it's really hard to get them out there all the time though. So basically this bill is to make our pond safe for visitors and residents. And I would also like to make a correction to the commissioner's testimony. In her testimony, in the third paragraph, she states that the original bill, which this bill is to amend, was never passed by Rhode Island, but it was. It was passed in Rhode Island. It's their Title 20, 1-19. It was passed in 1981. I actually got the idea for this proposed bill from an officer of Rhode Island DEM who gave me this Rhode Island bill, which does dual enforcement for fishing and wildlife, and to add boating to it. So.
Thank you for the testimony. So it's not so much a question of enforcement because NCON officers do come out there. It's just that I know where the boundary is and I scoot over on the Rhode Island side of the boundary, and this bill would give the jurisdiction for both states' waters.
Both sides. And I've been in communication with Rhode Island DEM. And I'm hoping that by passing this, I know it has to be passed in Rhode Island as well, but I know they're frustrated with the issue too. And I also believe that for them to go out there and patrol a little tiny sliver of the pond, if I had them, if this was in place, they would be more, they'd have more power to share in the enforcement responsibility. So it's not always Connecticut out there on the pond or the Coast Guard, but then they could be a part of the tool in the toolbox as well. So.
Thank you. Anyone with any Representative Callahan?
Thank you for coming in. Good to see you, Representative Lanu. So if we were to get something like this across the finish line, would it help you, would give you some juice with the Rhode Island to get this done?
Yes, I've been in communication with the Rhode Island DEM's legislative director. And I've also been in contact or will be in contact with the state rep for Exeter, Rhode Island. to help get this through over there. So.
And that's good. So we'd like to get you that. Now, when it comes to the pond is deep out there, that patrolling it?
NCON is out there, and the Rhode Island State Police have also been out there.
How often is our NCON out there? Our
They're
NCON?
out- It's not, I know that they're short-staffed, and I know there's limited resources as far as boats and stuff, and I know there's a lot of ponds in the state that also have issues with jet skis. They're out there when they can be out there, but it's honestly not the right times and not the right days. Ideally, eventually, we are working on a nonprofit to oversee the safety and the environmental aspects of the pond, because right now we're unable to apply for any grants from Rhode Island for the pond, because the part of the pond's in Rhode Island as far as weed management and pond management. So we're hoping to have a nonprofit where, with the help of DEP, we'd be able to hire our own seasonal pond patrol. So we're not dependent on all these other agencies to step up and do it.
And I'll talk to Representative Lanu about that, because we did that in my district. We established under, I think, 151B, a lake patrol, which would probably help
That's
you.
what we're trying to do.
Okay, and it'd be nice. So Deep is not on patrol enough to make a difference. So
Right.
therefore, your municipality is going to have to expend funds to do so.
Right, through the nonprofit, hoping there's grants from both states that will be able to help us cover that cost too.
Thank you. I know Representative Lanu wanted to add something, but go ahead.
Yeah, I thank
Okay.
you, Representative Callahan, and thank you for that answer, First Selectman. Just to expand with my experience in this matter, I was actually the state police, Connecticut State Police, actually came out with their boating division, boating enforcement. I was on the lake with them one day, one afternoon, and where we actually observed some drinking with people on their jet skis driving very high speeds, and as the patrol boat was pursuing them, they had to actually stop because it was at the point where they were getting close to the line and they're getting away with it. And of course, I'm not a police tactician, but they have their procedures as far as when to how to pursue somebody, when to actually essentially block them to try to board the craft, or actually have to stop the craft. So by the point they determined they had to do that, where we're getting into Rhode Island waters. So I saw this live time. It was one summer afternoon, and where the herons were high. So, and I've actually had conversations offline with law enforcement, and they're actually being disincentivized to go out there, because if they can't properly enforce the law, because they don't know where that invisible line is, and it can open them up to all sorts of litigation, all sorts of problems. There's no point in being there if they can't do the proper enforcement. So again, that's why this bill is so crucial.
Thank you. And thank you for making the drive to come here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Callahan. Senator Lopes.
Thanks. Hi. Quick question. As I drive through this pond quite often on the way to visit family in Rhode Island. I'm looking at your map and your testimony where you have the little green dot says start. I assume that's the boat launch.
Yes,
So that's the one in Rhode Island is the one right on 165. And then the Connecticut one is the one buried off another road.
yes.
Okay, I do see the activity on that Rhode Island boat launch when I drive through there. It's quite active. Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. And I contacted Deep to touch base with you about the discrepancy in the testimony. They'll be looking for you hopefully soon. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Veach, followed by Representative Dubitsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Representative Callahan covered most of the questions that I had made notes on. I do have one more thing I just want to add. The U.S. Coast Guard, they do have jurisdiction on this pond. Do you get any assistance from them at all? Perhaps when they cross over into the Rhode Island, waterway? Thank you.
We've been able to get the Coast Guard out there at least once per season over since COVID. The population on the pond has gone up a lot since COVID and people started doing more outdoor stuff.
Okay, thank you both for coming out and bringing this to our attention today. Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
Representative.
Thank you, Representative. I appreciate that question as well. And, the Coast Guard has been kind enough to go out there. It is technically an interstate body of water. But if you think of what the Coast Guard is charged with, they're in charge of the vast oceans, tracking down drug trade, drug trafficking, all sorts of issues with our oceans, patrolling Long Island Sound. Of course, what they represented to us is the ability to set up some sort of permanent command station, some sort of command post on Beach Pond is just not realistic with the resources and manpower that they have. So,
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you both.
Thank you, Representative Dubinsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming in. As Representative Lanou knows, we had discussed this earlier. I was concerned about the constitutionality of this bill and about any compact that Connecticut may enter with Rhode Island under Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3, the compact clause of the U.S. Constitution says no state shall, without consent of Congress, enter into any agreement or compact with another state. After some research, it appears that the courts don't interpret that clause as written. They limit it to compacts that affect the jurisdiction of the federal government, which this one clearly does not. So after some research, my concerns were allayed, and I'll certainly support this bill.
Thank you, Representative. It's always, I always appreciate your perspective and your advocacy for the Constitution of the United States, and we're certainly grateful for. If you don't mind, I just want to briefly explain to you what the underlying bill. There's already an established agreement among us and Rhode Island. And it's an agreement per se and not necessarily a compact as it relates to wildlife enforcement. So theoretically, if we had a Crocodile Dundee situation on Beach Pond and somebody's out there blowing up fish, they could pursue for that reason. What we're trying to do is tuck in boats and jet skis, so it can be more than just simply fish or wildlife, but also we want to tuck boats in there. So the boats, the jet skis, where if somebody's out there intoxicated, there's been stories. There's been, as you saw from the written testimony, there was a close call where there was a 4 or 5 jet skis going racing very fast from Rhode Island into Connecticut. Almost did a head-on crash with somebody out there kayaking. There was another situation where there was a grandfather in the water with his granddaughter, a very young granddaughter. Jet ski came by very fast, almost decapitated both of them, hit and decapitated both of them. It was a very close call. And these are real stories. This is not hype. This is not made up. We see these accounts in testimony, and the situation is very dire, and we need to get the boating tucked into this already established agreement that's been around, I believe, since 1949. So, and thank you again, Representative, for your support. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Palm.
Thank you both for being here. You talk a lot about the jet skis. Do you find that in the body of water that you're concerned about a problem similar to what I've got going on in my district, which abuts the Connecticut River, which is flotillas, people linking boats together and flying political banners? Is that a thing, or is it mostly the individual jet ski operator that concerns you?
We haven't had an issue with the flotillas. It's mostly jet skis.
Okay, great. I'm glad for you because they're terribly dangerous and perhaps it's because it's a bigger body of water, but people are linking boats illegally and hopping one to the next, and it's chaotic to say the least. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Representative. Seeing no other comments or questions, appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
Next is Senator Summers, followed by Anne Marie Dragonis.
Good morning. Happy almost St. Patrick's Day. Well, we were talking about 5350, and I do support that bill. I myself have worked with the first selectman for many years on the issues surrounding Beach Pond. Although I think it's going to be a struggle because unless Rhode Island is willing to cooperate, we're kind of back to the same place that we were. I do thank the Coast Guard. I remember calling them, asking them to come out to the pond, and they actually said, "Are you asking me to do what?" and put me on hold. And then they said, "Wow, you're right. We do have jurisdiction over interstate waterways," and they did come out. But it is a continual problem that we need to find a solution for. I'm not sure that it's going to work unless we get Rhode Island. So I believe that we need to continue to push forward. But I'm here to talk about 296. And I want to thank the committee for raising this bill. It is a task force bill to look at the roaming pig and bovine problem that we are experiencing in some of the smaller towns that I represent up north. I will say there's been a lot of work put into this. Myself, the members of DOAG, USDA, Representative Dauphiné, and the first selectman that you'll hear from in a little bit have spent hours on this problem that continues to exist. And the Reader's Digest version of what is happening is we have certain farmers that do not contain their animals. We now have pigs that have gotten loose. They have continued to have litters that are running feral throughout the town. We do hear different communications from USDA versus DOAG. And our NECOG, which is the enforcement that we have. This is a small town that does not have a police force. So the animal control officer from the regional NECOG is the one who is in charge of fining the individual when the pigs or cows get out. We did pass legislation that extended this fine from just cats and dogs to livestock last year, and thank you for that. But it has not seemed to work because the farmer has extensive fines that are waiting in the court system, which continues to be pushed off for a court date. We have put up trail cameras to look at where the pigs are. They have not been seen, but they are now being seen because the grass is turning green. I have pictures of them. And these are not little piglets. These are very large feral pigs. We've had farmers that have been chased. We have one person who has been bitten, and they absolutely destroy property and destroy lawns. And I have certain individuals that have lost significant value in their properties. For example, one person has a $30,000 loss for his lawn because the animals are getting out. They have eaten $25,000 worth of hay from somebody's hayfield last year. And it is a problem that continues to exist in a small little town, which I believe has about 2,500 people. So I really appreciate this committee taking this up and addressing this. It's something that I think if we don't address will become a continual problem. We cannot have feral pigs running around, crossing the road, and perhaps, getting into significant issues. I just want to finish with last year. There was a plan to trap the pigs. We had permission from the town and also private individuals. The pigs were then going to be euthanized on the spot because they are carrying something that makes them unfit for human or animal consumption. But they could not get permission, from what I understand, from DOAG to do it. This was from the USDA. So there is conflicting information from DOAG versus USDA. I am tired of getting a different story and being spun around when I'm really concerned about the safety and what could happen, because these pigs are not going to stay in that town. They're going to continue to have more piglets and continue this problem in other towns. So thank you. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Senator. Didn't we do a fix in a bill last year?
I wish that fixed it. It was a great idea, but it hasn't seemed to fix it because the fine that you, and I thank you for that. It gives us some enforcement where it allows, if the animals get out, for the animal control officer or police officer, they don't have a police officer, they have state police. And I can't tell you how many times the state police have said to me, do you want me to come out and find somebody for a pig getting loose, or do you want me to take care of the accident on the highway? So it's a matter of priorities. So that falls to the NECOG animal control officer, who has worked with us and has provided the fines, but this person is facing over $35,000 worth of fines. Think of how many times a $95 fine for these animals getting out, and the court date just continues to be pushed out.
So my final question is, so these swine are associated with somebody that you know that owns them, or have they repopulated so much that nobody owns them?
Yes to both. Yes, they were originally tagged and they would get out, but now there have been litters born in the wild, and those pigs are, I would consider, feral. They're not, I guess they would be owned to the person that they came from, but there's no tags. They're in the woods.
Representative Palm, followed by Representative O'Day.
Hi, Senator. What were they used for originally? What is the farmer's reason for having them in the first place? Are they slaughtered for Joe's favorite food, bacon, or are they what that he keeps smelling
There's so many
inexplicably?
bacon jokes that are so inappropriate that we could make right now. They were originally harvested for food. And you know, the practice on that farm is what is called restorative farming, which has a different meaning than having these animals just get out and find their own food. But they originally came from a farm that they were used to raise for food.
Okay. And I'm not, with my next question, in any way diminishing the concern or casting aspersions, but I'm just curious, has the community gotten together and tried to talk to this person as like neighbor to neighbor?
Yes, this is a very friendly community. I know that at the beginning when and you know, I feel badly because I don't want to make this just about one particular farmer, but in this case, it is right now just one farm. That's the problem. A very friendly community, willing to help, willing to do whatever they can to make this person successful, because it's a farming community. To give you a sort of a landscape of what this town is like, there's a farm that just a year and a half ago was transferred. It was the first time the farm was sold since it was deeded to this family from King George V. So it is a very old farming community. But over time, when we have this continual problem, myself and another representative faced literally 60 farmers that were really unhappy about what's happening. I don't want to say farmers with pitchforks, but that's sort of the idea. And, you know, we are sort of paralyzed in what we can do because it is run by, you know, it's covered by the state police. They have their priorities. And the small town, you know, has tried to help as much as they can, but there's a limit to what they can and are willing to do. I will say this particular farm had applied for a grant. I think it was about a $20,000 grant for fencing, which I was, yes. But part of the thing with DOAG is when they come to the farm, they want to get on the farm and see the condition of the animals, and they were refused entrance onto the farm. So therefore DOAG could not give them the grant money to put up the fencing. So it's a chicken and an egg.
And my last question is, when, assuming that the homeowners who've suffered losses, have they put in a claim to their insurance company? And if so, what are they being told?
Yes, we had suggested that they do that, and insurance does not cover damage caused by livestock. So that is a problem. I think since that time, a few that have experienced the most damage, and it's significant. I have pictures of I never realized how devastating pigs can be to a lawn or your yard. They just destroy it. They have, I believe, filed some civil lawsuits to try to recoup the cost of trying to make them whole again. I honestly am not aware of where they are in the process, but that has just come about as of recently.
Representative O'Day.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, Senator, for your testimony. I was going to suggest, well, what town is it, if you don't mind?
It's Sterling, Connecticut.
Because I was going to suggest a lawsuit on a civil, and as an attorney, there's a good one right over there, could bring a claim against the farmer. And I'm wondering, maybe if the chair knows, but are you allowed to shoot a feral pig for self-defense?
I'm told you are not allowed to do that. And Representative Dubitsky has been very helpful. You can't just, from what I understand, if the pig is charging you and it's self-defense, you probably could, but you can't just, we don't want farmers in Sterling going out and shooting feral pigs. That would be a bad look. It's just not okay at this point. So that's what I've been told by the state police, but I'm not a lawyer. I can't say that's true.
Thank you very much, Senator. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Cooley, followed by Representative Reddington Hughes.
Thank you, Senator, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator, for coming in. Feral pigs are a incredibly dangerous situation if let to go unchecked. Had a situation in Canada just 20 years ago in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, which is spread through Manitoba, is now North Dakota, Minnesota, and Montana. And Ryan Brook, who's university professor at Saskatchewan, University of Saskatchewan, says, is basically defined that feral swine is the most invasive animal on the planet and an ecological train wreck. If we have feral pigs in the state of Connecticut and we do not get very proactive, it will be in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. They breed incredibly fast. They will grow and they're incredibly dangerous. They essentially breed like rabbits and they're incredibly elusive, and the amount of ecological damage they can do is phenomenal. Ask those in Arkansas and Texas that have been dealing with this for decades, and the situation along the US-Canadian border. This is a serious problem that needs to be taken seriously. We're in the early stages of it, but it cannot be kicked down. Can't be kicked down the road. We have to deal with it, or our own native species will suffer greatly from it, and it's going to greatly hurt our agricultural industry as well. I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
If I may, the USDA did put up some trail cameras in different areas to try to sort of monitor where they were, and they saw them for a period of time. Now it's the winter, they kind of went away. And we have heard from DOAG, well, we're not seeing them on the trail camera. That doesn't mean they're not there. They are there, and they're starting to come back now that the grass is getting green. I have pictures that have just sent to me last week of these massive, big, I would consider it a boar on the side of the road. There's pictures of them running across the road in front of cars, like straight full force running into the side of the house and then getting up and running around. So 1,000 words I can show the committee after if you're interested.
Thank you. Representative Reddington Hughes, followed by Representative Dubitsky.
Oh, well, thank you, Senator, for enlightening us on this. My question has to do with something that you referenced earlier, and it was that they were not fit for consumption, and that they had disease that was associated with them. Would this not be a public health issue then?
I couldn't get any more information than that from DOAG. That's what I was told. And that's why they were originally going to try to work with USDA to trap them and euthanize them on the spot. But again, what USDA is telling me is that they couldn't get permission from DOAG to do that. And so I'm not sure what the real story is. I do think it's interesting that DOAG is not here today. They did submit written testimony, but I don't think they're testifying. It would be great if they could. I'm not sure what the thing is. I have spoken with them just in the LOB yesterday, and they said they really want to work on this project too, on this problem, not project. But that's the only information I have. I wasn't sure what it was.
Yeah.
It wasn't given to me, etc.
So you have no idea of what kind of consequences people could suffer as a result of eating these pigs?
I do not. That was not shared with me. That's what I told you is what I was told.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Dubitsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator, for coming in. This is a very important issue. The last thing that we want in Connecticut is a population of feral pigs. As some of my colleagues have mentioned, they're incredibly destructive. They're very dangerous. They can, run 30 miles an hour. They can be 600-700 pounds. They can kill you and they will eat you. It is pretty nasty. Many states in the nation have feral pig problems, and the solution in some of those states is they have a hunting season all year long. If you see one, you can shoot it. They even have bounties for them in some areas because they are so destructive. I was in Hawaii a number of years ago, and they just said any pig that is seen, they'll just shoot. So last year we did pass a law to try to alleviate this, and unfortunately it was premised on on the farmer being sort of susceptible to fines. Since he is not, I guess we need to come up with another solution. And I think this task force to study this is probably the best solution, because we really need to get all the stakeholders in a room and figure out if there is a need for legislation, or if DOAG and USDA and the local authorities already have the power to do what is necessary. We in the legislature give farmers a lot of leeway and a lot of benefits that maybe others don't get. And it makes farmers look bad when there is a farmer that doesn't do the right thing. And that appears to be the case in this instance. And I think it really is incumbent on us to ensure that there are adequate resources for the stakeholders to deal with this problem. And I thank you very much for bringing this bill and coming in today.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Representative. I want to thank you for all your work. Doug has been very instrumental in helping someone like myself navigate this problem. I will say, if the task force is initiated, one of the things that I would love for them to look at is, who has the enforcement authority to do something? Because there have been times when roaming animals have been picked up by the NECOG. They've been transferred and housed, and DOAG returns them to the farmer because they don't have a place to house them. So it's this catch and release, catch and release. I'm not sure it's clear who has the authority to do what, but basically no one's been able to do anything. So now we have this problem. The fines were a great idea, and I thank the committee for passing that. But it's not working because in this particular case, it's just accumulating fines, and that it's getting pushed off through our court system. So I appreciate all that you guys have done so far.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Harrison.
So I do have a question. I hear that you said you call NECOG. Has anybody from DOAG sent out the state animal officers, control officers who can have the authority to confiscate them?
I can't answer that. I don't remember. Honestly, this has been like an ongoing problem for so long. I'm not sure if it was the state or not. I know that later today, you're going to hear from the first selectman and somebody else who works in town hall who are more closely involved with the daily, so they can answer that question. But I do know that when animals have been taken into custody, they've been held at NECOG for a period of time at the animal control, but they are always been returned to the farmer. So that's as much as I know as far as that specific question.
I don't know if I should say that, but DOAG is here.
I meant to testify. It was my understanding they weren't going to be testifying today, so it would be helpful because you could ask questions. That's all.
I
Thank
will
you.
be asking him that question. Thank you, Senator. Next is Anne Marie Dragonis, followed by Lincoln Cooper. Anne Marie, I see you're muted.
Hi.
There you go.
Good afternoon, Senator Lopez, Representative Grasco, Senator Harding, Representative Callahan, and members of the committee. My name is Anne Marie Dragonis. I'm the first select woman for the town of Seymour. I also serve on the board of directors of the Bristol Facility Policy Board, which oversees a trash to energy plant that is located in Bristol. I'm representing the board today. I would like to offer brief comments on Senate Bill 293, an act concerning municipal solid waste management. The bill would authorize a waste characterization study and also clarify weight limits for transporting solid waste on our roadways. I wanted to address a different issue relating to solid waste management, if I may. The closure of the Mirror plant has meant that hundreds of thousands of tons of solid waste are now transported out of state to landfills in Pennsylvania and Ohio. If the current trend continues, more than half of all our state's trash will be exported annually, and this is simply not sustainable. To avoid further widening of this crisis, I suggest we move quickly to invest in the foundation of the current system, which is the resource recovery facilities. Resource recovery facilities process almost all of the solid waste that is handled in state while at the same time generating electricity for the grid. The Bristol plant is getting older and needs reinvestment and modernization. In fact, Pura acknowledged this as much in their first final report to the Legislative Task Force on Solid Waste Issues last year, when they stated, and I quote, "In order to adequately invest in property, plants, and equipment, some form of public subsidy or financing for existing plants may be required." I would like to request that you take one step in this direction in the 2024 session. Municipalities pay an indirect tax of $1.50 a ton on trash that is processed by each RRF, which is the resource facilities. This amounts to about $330,000 annually for the Bristol plant. We propose that Bristol be able to retain all such funds on a 5-year pilot project basis. Once they document to the DEP that the funds will be reinvested in the facility for a modernization implementation plan. Taking these dollars away from the Bristol plant and diverting them to other uses, as is now the case, is simply not fair in view of significant need for modernization of the facility. This proposal is a small step towards ensuring the continued operations and the viability of the facility. We hope you will continue including this proposal in Senate Bill 293. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam First Select Woman. Any questions or comments for the First Select Woman? I see none in the room nor online. Thank you for your testimony today, ma'am, and your patience.
Thank you.
Next is Lincoln Cooper, followed by Victoria Robinson.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
I'd like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to comment on Senate Bill 296, as well as an opportunity to give you an overview of what's happened here in Sterling for the past 3 years in relation to this roaming animal issue. In early 2021, a young couple from Canterbury bought an 80-acre parcel of land in our town. It's located on Newport Road. The parcel they purchased has many acres of pasture land as well as forested land. There's a forested portion as well. There are no structures of any kind on this property. Newport Road runs through a community of houses and making it a school bus route. Farther up the road are 2 gravel operations which generate heavy truck traffic. In short, it's a busy road. A small herd of cows was brought to the property in early summer of that year, and due to inadequate fencing that I assume was intending to contain the animals, the cows started to roam the neighborhood regularly, including the aforementioned Newport Road. In addition to the commercial hayfields, homeowners' lawns being ruined, one nearby farmer had his garden, a vegetable garden, which was in full bloom, trampled just before the cows ate hay and grain out of his barn. Animal control from NECOG was called on several occasions and violations were issued. This town has no police force, so the Connecticut State Police were also called on several attempts were made to reason with the owners. And those attempts were met with angry and arrogant denials of any responsibility. At a later date, a group of pigs was introduced to this property, and they too quickly found ways to roam. Many of those pigs stayed in the wooded portion of the property, and we all know at the rate that pigs can reproduce, we very well could be looking at a large feral pig population in the very near future. This would create a whole new set of problems. Several of the pigs have also roamed into neighborhood backyards and gardens and caused further damage. It is clear to me that the task force that's being proposed will have several areas of responsibility. At the very top of that list, I feel as though the task force should try to find a way to ensure that, to ensure that the roaming animal violations, such as they should have the same urgency and the same gravity as other violations, say, such as a speeding ticket. If you get ticketed for speeding, you'll find yourself in court in short order. But at the same time, the executive director of NECOG informs me that the violations issued in this case number in the thousands. And yet, little, if anything, has been done at the court level. Changing that has to be a priority. As far as I'm concerned, it has to be a priority of this task force. If that can't be done, if that can't be accomplished, this task force is going to amount to nothing more than a very expensive waste of time and energy. In closing, I'd like to say that I'd like to go on record as stating that the people of this town that have been directly affected by these roaming animals have shown a level of patience and tolerance and restraint that is highly commendable. I can only hope that it continues. I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. First Selectman. Any questions or comments from anyone here in the Representative Dubitzky?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. First Selectman, for testifying today. As you know, last year we passed a statute or an amendment to a statute to deal with this situation. And my understanding is that the farmer at issue has many thousands of dollars worth of fines based on the new statute that we passed last year. Can you tell us what the holdup is, why you're not able to have those fines enforced, and why you can't then foreclose on those to resolve this problem?
Well, Representative Dubitzky, first of all, the town recognizes that this is a civil issue. As much as we would like to get involved, needless to say, this does not involve town property, town equipment, or town employees. So therefore, this becomes a civil issue, basically neighbor versus neighbor. So those violations that have been issued by NECOG. And exactly why they haven't gone anywhere in court is something that I don't know the answer to. I've just been told that many violations have been issued and nothing has been done, or very little has been done in terms of bringing those issues to court. I wish I could answer your question better, but I frankly don't think I can.
Do you know if the fines are in court, if NECOG or somebody is trying to enforce those fines? Or I know you don't know what the holdup is, but is it in court?
My understanding is that NECOG is trying to monitor those situations on a regular basis. Exactly where they stand is something that I'm not aware of. I'm not in contact with NECOG every day or every week. And I would assume that since they have been very helpful and forthcoming with information when it's available, I would assume that they would have contacted me to let me know if anything substantial had changed in terms of where those violations stand. So far, I've heard very little, if anything. They seem to be as perplexed about the situation as we are.
Okay. Do you happen to know if John Filczek or somebody from NECOG is going to testify about this bill?
I believe John has submitted written testimony.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. And we do have John Filczek on our agenda. Seeing no other comments or questions, Mr. First Selectman, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Next is Victoria Robinson, followed by Mark Mitchell.
Good afternoon. I appreciate the opportunity to testify. I wanted to discuss the same as Lincoln Cooper, the raised bill 296. I got involved in this roaming livestock thing last spring. It's been an issue in our town, but I had several friends who live directly next to or down the road a piece from this farmer. It's been going on for a few years. The animals escape and they're not retrieved. The neighbors try to push them back. I'm a lifelong equestrian. And when this started, I said, okay, so your animals get out, you go retrieve your animals, you fix your fence and you put them away. It's always been common practice. So I looked to the state statutes and I was unable to find where anyone is required to fence in their livestock. Connecticut simply does not have that rule. You actually have a rule to fence out people's livestock, which was shocking to me.
Victoria, we're having a hard time hearing you. Can you maybe move a little closer to the?
I'm on top of it. I'll try. Okay, is this better?
Yeah, we can see you now. Thank you.
Okay. So I was shocked to find that a state with such a huge agricultural community had no rules about fencing your stock in. This farmer has become verbally abusive. He threatens neighbors. Our local animal control officer had to get a restraining order against him. In my efforts to help the neighbors and whatnot, this farmer tried to get a protective order against me because I was taking pictures of his animals, because I was out in the woods on other people's property documenting the pigs. It's been very frustrating. And, I had reached out to Senator Summers, Representative Dauphiné, and if it wasn't for them, I don't know where we would be right now. They helped us immensely last year getting the state statute passed. We thought the fines would work. We're now at, it's a little over $30,000. And I think I figured it out. It equals out to 315 separate tickets, separate animal violations. And now we have these pigs. The pigs, just because not everybody knows, a pig can have 3 to 4 litters a year. They can have 10 to 14 piglets per litter. We've identified for sure 3 full-grown moms living in the woods. They've been out there since last spring. So we're probably approaching
Victoria.
Yes.
Don't mean to interrupt, but you have a question from Senator Harding.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Victoria, and thank you for testifying. Your Senator Summers has been an amazing advocate on this issue, and I want to thank her for her work. But I also would like to, ask you kind of a clarifying question. I think the issue here seems to be enforcement. I know Senator Summers worked hard, last session in getting some of the language changed to allow DEEP and DOAG and other entities to actually enforce the laws as it relates to protecting the community and protecting the surrounding environment, et cetera. But I just want to kind of just lay it out on the line in terms of what you're actually dealing with, and how serious this problem has gotten, yet despite the fact that we passed legislation. So, I mean, how often are you seeing these animals get out? You know, how many of them and how often? And, you know, is this a weekly thing? How often are you seeing this occur?
So right now, I will say right now, during the winter, the animals are pretty much contained because there's no need for them to roam. There's no grass available next door. Last spring, I will say in March, mid-March, is when the cows really started roaming again because the grass was coming up. That meant a herd of 25 to 40 cows would leave the farm, go next door to the hayfield, graze for several hours. That usually occurred between 5 a.m. and 6 a.m. The neighbors would push the cows back, and then in the afternoon, the cows would come and graze again, take a nap, and go back home before dark. It was a daily occurrence. Some days they would come 3 times a day. The pigs were harder to track. They would escape and then go back. But then once they figured out there's a lot more food up in the woods, that's when they started living up in the woods. And I was documenting and logging these calls for the state police at that point. And I would say I, on the average, would get 3 pig calls a day with photographs or videos of the pigs in somebody's yard or in the road or wherever. So I'm anticipating that the activity will be picking up again because our grass is starting to get green. So I'm sure we'll be calling someone, but the issue is that no one really wants to deal with this. As Senator Summers said, you get conflicting stories. Mr. Cooper and I had a couple of meetings with the Department of Agriculture. We were assured they were doing something. There were questions about the care of these animals, the quality of care, the condition of the animals, and we were assured something was going to be done, and nothing has happened. The USDA came out. They've been fantastic. I've talked to them rather recently, and they said to me, we had identified these groups of pigs, but they've moved on looking for more food, and the Department of Ag would not allow them to trap them, which would have solved this problem as far as the pigs living in the woods.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your testimony. I want to thank you for your advocacy. The last thing, I think you already answered this question, that I just wanted to reaffirm is, so you did talk about, DOAG's involvement, but I think, the question I had really was, have you had any help from DOAG? I think you already answered my question. And I think that's the reason why this bill is before us. Is that correct?
Yeah, sadly, we haven't had any help from them. I mean, they talk a lot, we've felt encouraged several times over the years, but nothing has happened. Nothing has changed.
Well, I appreciate your testimony here today. I appreciate your advocacy. I certainly appreciate Senator Summers and her, diligent work on this. And, certainly the hope here is that we can continue to push this legislation forward, so we can finally get some action from some state entity or some entity to finally enforce this and to bring peace and assistance for the community and also for the animals involved as well. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Seeing no other comments, we appreciate your testimony, Victoria.
Thank you.
Next is Mark Mitchell, followed by Jennifer Eaton-Jones.
So good morning, Representative Gresco, Senator Harding, Representative Callahan, I'm sorry, and members of the committee. My name is Dr. Mark Mitchell. I'm a public health and environmental health physician. I'm an emeritus professor of climate change, energy, and environmental health equity at George Mason University. I'm also on the steering committee of the Connecticut Health Professionals for Climate Action. I'm here today to testify in favor of HB 5349, an act concerning the performance of a pollen count. Pollen is produced by many types of plants, and it leads to allergies and asthma in many Connecticut residents. Hartford, Bridgeport, and New Haven have often been named as asthma and allergy capitals of the United States by the American Lung Association, as these cities have been in the top 20 for these diseases nationwide. Climate change is increasing the amount of pollen, the potency of the pollen, and causing allergies, as well as lengthening the allergy season. Despite this, there was only one remaining pollen counting machine in the state of Connecticut until 2022, when this machine broke. Waterbury Hospital had been donating their hospital staff, and Dr. Christopher Randolph, a professor of allergy and immunology at Yale Hospital, had been volunteering as a supervisory physician of this labor-intensive process. Neither Waterbury Hospital nor Yale Hospital are in a position to repair or to replace the machinery or to continue to pay for staff to support it. After 30 years of this work, Dr. Randolph is ready to retire and cannot find another volunteer allergist to do this work. We have been in communication with Connecticut Deep, which has agreed to operate the program on a pilot basis with Yale and to purchase and validate a new, less labor-intensive, fully automated pollen counting machine if there are funds available, which is estimated at $300,000. The Connecticut Health Professionals for Climate Action is asking that the legislature authorize DEEP to conduct such a program and to fund it through the ARPA funding or through bonding, if not by other means. This service is critical to health professionals and patients for accurate diagnosis of the types of allergies people have, as well as for avoiding exposure to pollen. It's critical to the pollen forecasts that weather forecasters provide, as well as to research on climate change and on allergies. It might be able to help to save lives in the case of rare but sometimes lethal thunderstorm-related asthma epidemics, such as the one in Melbourne, Australia in 2016 that sent 10,000 people to the emergency room and killed at least 10 people. These epidemics can be predicted and prevented with accurate information. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. So I don't know if you were in the room when the Deep Commissioner first testified this afternoon around noonish, but their electronic testimony indicates that they don't have the resources or ability to do this, but you're saying that they're willing to do a pilot with Yale.
They're willing to do it if they have the funding. It just seems to me that this should qualify for ARPA funding. This is because they don't, Yale and Waterbury Hospital don't have the funding because they don't have the money now, and so they can no longer afford to do this. So the $300,000 would be pretty much a one-time cost for the machinery to buy the machines. They want to buy a labor-intensive machine and which has been validated and compare it to a new fully automated machine which has not been validated. So they want to validate it for a couple of years with one-time funding.
Understood. Any questions for Dr. Mitchell? Representative Arzeno.
Dr. Mitchell, thank you very much for coming today and submitting testimony. Who should apply for the ARPA funding?
I don't know that, but we want it to be run. The discussion has been for it to be run jointly between Yale and Deep, and then for it eventually to be taken over by Deep.
Yeah, probably. Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Representative Palm.
Dr. Mitchell, this is the piece of equipment that Chipka is in favor of, right, and would like to see. Can you give us really briefly a summary of why this is important? Why do we care what the pollen count is?
Right. Because allergists rely on it every day. So, you know, the pollen counting is not only counting the number of pollen, but it's also counting speciation, which is counting the different types of pollen. So people need to know which type of pollen they're allergic to in order to avoid that and also to have better forecasts. Like I said, you know, there can be an outbreak of asthma that can kill people, but that's caused by a certain type of pollen, grass pollen. And if they know that we have high levels of grass pollen, and if there's a thunderstorm coming, then they can predict that. So that's why it's important for us to know what kind of pollen there is and the amount of pollen.
And did I understand you to say recently that not only is the pollen becoming more virulent earlier, but there are also new variants or new aspects to it that affect people differently from the way it used to?
Well, with climate change and the increase in carbon dioxide, we are seeing more pollen, and the pollen is getting more potent and causing more allergies. You know, we hear from our pediatricians that they're having to give allergy medications to younger and younger children, medications that have never been tested in children, never been approved for children because of that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Mitchell.
Thank you.
Next is Jennifer Eaton-Jones, followed by David Greenstein.
Good afternoon, Representative Grusko and distinguished members of the Environment Committee. Thank you. I am Jenny Eaton-Jones. I'm the Executive Director of the HRA, representing 14 municipalities in Western Connecticut. I'm here on several bills. We support HB 5351, an act studying the need for EPR carpets. The only state with carpet EPR in action is California. It has a recycling rate of 34%, while the rest of the country is close to zero. And so as we face the significant shortfall of waste capacity in the state, I think a study is reasonable. Regarding HB 5353, an act concerning gas cylinder stewardship program, we support industry's amendment. We appreciate their effort to reach out to stakeholders, particularly municipalities, for their feedback and suggestions and finding common ground. We believe this is a reasonable amendment. Regarding HB 5352, an act concerning minor revisions to the tire stewardship program, unfortunately, we do oppose the requested amendment. Although it is a minor request asking for more time, we believe this is a stall tactic and it's really unnecessary to move the plan forward. We are also concerned that this amendment opens additional amendments on the floor that are not included in this language for us as municipalities and other stakeholders and members of the public to give important feedback. I would like to remind the committee, it took 8 years to get this bill passed. Industry had those 8 years to work out their concerns and their significant time to plan. This bill passed 101 to 43 in the House and 33 to 3 in the Senate because you all recognize the serious issues with end-of-life management of tires in the state. The town of Trumbull just last month spent $50,000 to clean up the illegally dumped site that occurred last May. And while the city of Bridgeport continues to report their own struggles with dumping, this bill is intended to create a system of accountability from cradle to grave. So let's get the program up and running without delay. We have the infrastructure. Our current recyclers and processors in the state, from Lincoln, aka Liberty Tire, to CRM, are all able to take our tires today and make this a successful program. We have companies such as Pretread out of Denver, Colorado, who make road barriers from recycled tires, who are eager to come set up shop here in the state and create jobs. I also want to mention, I do have concern with Liberty Tire's written testimony. It seems they want to amend the bill to influence the TSO to protect their interests. No matter which side of the aisle you sit on, I don't imagine any of you would support preventing an open market that allows businesses to operate in our state, that don't allow businesses to operate in our state, creating competition and jobs. Let's let industry, the tire manufacturers and the brand owners work out their issues and concerns with DEEP in their plan that has yet to be submitted, and let's not delay this much needed program. I know I'm out of time, but my last comment is regarding HB the HRA support for SB 293 and that concerning municipal solid waste. We do support and encourage a characterization study. And regarding Section 2, increasing the weight limits on the transportation of solid waste, the current limits are adding costs to our towns to move smaller loads of waste, which result in more trucks on the road. With the state generating 3.5 million tons of solid waste annually, that's about 160,000 MSW trucks on the road. This change would reduce that number to about 110 trucks, cutting it down to about 3 to 1. I could say more about that, but I hope you will support that amendment. Maybe it needs to go to transportation, but thank you for your time. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Jen, for your testimony. Any comments or questions from the room? I don't see any. So thank you for the testimony, and you will be hearing from us.
Thank you, Representative Gresco.
Next is David Greenstein, whom I do not see in the room nor virtually. Oh, there he is. David, you're up. David, you're on mute.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead, David.
Oh, thank you, Chairman Gresco, Chairman Lopes, and Ranking Members Harding and Callahan, and members of the committee. Thank you for having me back to testify before the committee today. As many of you know, my name is David Greenstein, and I'm the Executive Vice President at Liberty Tire Recycling, which operates our Lakin Tire East facility in West Haven. Lakin Tire East is the longest operating tire collector and processor in the state of Connecticut, where we manufacture feedstock for recycled rubber uses. We've been in operation since 1978, and since that time, we have recycled more than 50 million tires generated by the state of Connecticut. Each year, we recycle more than half of the state's 3.5 million tires it generates, as well as many others from surrounding states. I am here to testify in favor of HB 5352 with amendment. Some of you may remember we believe that there was a better path forward for managing end-of-life tires in the state other than extended producer responsibility. However, we know that EPR is law of the land in the state of Connecticut, and we are committed to working with the state to ensure the best possible outcomes. To that end, we would like to voice our support for the changes already included in the legislation, and we would like to suggest an amendment to strengthen the legislation and therefore the EPR program even further. We are asking for an amendment that would clarify existing language to allow the stewardship organization to balance cost and performance when selecting service providers, and to add new language that provides the stewardship organization guidance, including reviewing companies' performance history when selecting service providers, incorporating existing contracts into the program, as long as those contracts support the performance goals of the program, and submitting potential service providers to a financial qualifying test to ensure the citizens of Connecticut do not end up financially responsible for any failure on a service provider's end. We believe these are common sense changes that align with the intent of the original legislation, better environmental outcome for end-of-life tires in Connecticut, while ensuring the taxpayer is not responsible for the cost. We have been in contact with many of the major stakeholders as part of this process and not aware of any objections to these amendments. Thank you for the time to speak. We look forward to continually work together to make this law as successful as possible, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, David. So you, in your electronic testimony, you have your suggested amendments that you went over in the electronic testimony?
Correct.
Okay. So I don't know if you were able to hear the previous testifier before you saying that, the purpose of this bill was to stall for time. It's a stall tactic. Your comments.
My comment with respect to that is that if it ensures the right outcome, if we need some more time, I think that should be taken into consideration. I think it's somewhat irrelevant that it took 7 years to pass. It's here, and let's get it right.
Thank you, David. Any other comments or Representative Dubitzky?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for coming in. What do you do with all those tires?
In Connecticut, well, we provide a feedstock, which should be clear. We take in the tires from all of the retail stores throughout Connecticut, and then we chop it into a 2-inch piece. We provide that as a feedstock, whether it would be for tie-dye fuel, for crumb rubber, to make various products such as rubberized asphalt and other things such as mulch. But we are relatively indifferent to where we supply the 2-inch material as long as it's environmentally safe.
Okay, so you don't make a product, you make a feedstock for other manufacturers to make products.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Dubitzky. Seeing no other hands raised, David, we appreciate your testimony and we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Next is Jen Stowe, followed by Sean Moore.
Good afternoon, Chair Gresco, Chair Lopes, ranking members Callahan and Harding, and esteemed members of the committee. Thank you for your time this afternoon. My name is Jen Stowe. I am the Vice President of Government Relations for the Carpet and Rug Institute. We represent the carpet manufacturers in the United States. We have been around since the late 1940s, and we are about 95% of the soft floor covering that you walk on in the United States is made in the United States. We're very proud of that fact that we're made in America. We are not against recycling. We are just not in favor of this bill. We are in favor of recycling when there are market-based solutions, because mandates do not necessarily make carpet recycling easier. In 2002, the Carpet and Rug Institute worked with multi-stakeholders to put together a group called the Carpet America Recovery Effort. And that works on recycling with entrepreneurs, collectors, people that are turning the post-consumer carpet into other products. Carpet is very difficult to recycle. It's not A to A. It's not like paper or plastic. There's a lot of detail, involved with separating the face fiber from the back. That said, we have a number of concerns about this bill. It seems that the study lacks transparency. There's a lack of industry inclusion. It's not clear who the stakeholders would be that would be involved, if the study would be public, if it would be open to public comment, and if so, would that public comment be included along with the report back to the legislature. In the study, as the bill exists now, there's no definition. Carpet is undefined. And who's doing the study in conjunction with the commissioner is unclear. I would also note that the chemical of PFAS that's referenced in the bill is no longer used by our manufacturers. It has not been used for a number of years, neither long chain or short chain chemistry for PFAS. Carpet is not toxic. It does take up space, but not a significant space in the landfill. And it also seems with this piece of legislation that EPR legislation is a foregone conclusion. And we have a number of concerns regarding EPR. As I mentioned, carpet is one of the few remaining made in America manufactured products. If this legislation, this study would lead to an EPR bill, you would see sales volume, which are already low in Connecticut, decrease due to the cost of the program. You heard a previous speaker reference California having the only program and the amount of recycling that's happening there. But I would add that yes, the recycling has gone up as a result of significant subsidies, and carpet sales in the state of California have gone down 50% as opposed to the rest of the country, which is at 25%. As a result of fashion choices, not as a result of fees put on carpet as in California. EPR would put us at a competitive disadvantage. There are other floor coverings from which you can select other than carpet. So it puts us at a competitive disadvantage. It would drive the prices up for consumers, and consumers could potentially be driven to make purchases
Hi, Jen.
across state lines.
You have a question from Representative Callahan.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. You referenced, I believe in your testimony, has there been studies like on carpet recycling done in other states? And if so, what were the outcomes of that?
Thanks for the question, Representative Callahan. Yes, we have actually participated in several locales, one being New York City, one being the state of Delaware, and one being in Illinois. In Delaware, that study was mandated by the legislature with a report going back to the Environment Committee. The result of that study was that there was not volume or infrastructure that would support that type of program in the state of Delaware. I imagine it would be similar in Connecticut. Likewise, in New York City, the city council convened a stakeholder group and we participated in that. Also, the outcome being that it would not be successful. And additionally, in Illinois, we participated in an ad hoc group. It was not mandated. We worked with the bill sponsor at the time and brought stakeholders to the table. And that was probably eight years ago, and there still has not been a bill in Illinois. We, in fact, attempted to do a pilot project in Chicago, which was unfortunately unsuccessful.
Jen, thank you. And I just wanted to just one quick follow-up because for time constraints. And I actually read about this in your CARE website. Doesn't seem to be a lot of volume in Connecticut. So would it be worth a repurposer or someone like who would recycle carpets to have a facility in Connecticut? I don't know what the volume would be.
So you have gathered the correct information from doing your homework. There, in fact, would not be enough volume in the state of Connecticut. California was referenced as a success, but California has very different demographics than Connecticut. And California also had some existing infrastructure in place, which Connecticut does not. And
so we'd have to ship it. So we'd have to ship it somewhere else to be recycled.
Precisely. And in fact, the closest recycler to Connecticut had been located in New Jersey, and they closed their doors just a couple of weeks ago.
All right. I appreciate your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Callahan. Seeing no other hands raised in the room, Jen, lastly, you would be willing to have a conversation as we discussed going forward in the off session to...
Absolutely. We would happily be a resource moving forward.
Thank you, Jen. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next is Sean Moore, followed by Lindsay Setti. Okay.
Good afternoon, Chairman Lopes, Chairman Gresco, Ranking Member Callahan, and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Sean Moore. I'm here today on behalf of the U.S. Tire Manufacturers Association in support of House Bill 5352. You do have my written testimony. I just want to touch on a couple of key points. The first is a big thank you to this committee for raising this bill. I know that nobody was eager to talk EPR for tires for yet another year, so we certainly appreciate your willingness to work with us on minor modifications to clarify and strengthen the law. Secondly, this is not a delay tactic. Our industry is fully committed to establishing a robust compliance mechanism in accordance with Public Act 2362. We're currently working with DEEP and stakeholders to establish the country's first tire stewardship organization, and we are on track to submit a stewardship plan to the state in advance of the January 1, 2025 deadline. In working through the mechanics of the law, we have identified 5 minor changes that would help provide additional clarity and a better template as states look to follow Connecticut's lead on this issue. 2.5 of those are reflected in the current text of the bill. We appreciate and support moving the deadline for compliance from 120 days to 180 days after DEEP approves a stewardship plan, which is consistent with Connecticut's EPR law for gas cylinders. We also support the greater financial flexibility provided to TSOs and the proposed modifications to the percentage of program funding that DEEP may collect for its administrative oversight of the program. USTMA proposes further strengthening this section of the law to allow DEEP to use a portion of the fees to support enhanced enforcement of the state's anti-dumping laws. Addressing illegal dumping is one of the primary goals of the law, and it's far more costly to clean up after the fact than it is to catch perpetrators and hold them financially liable for their actions. Lastly, we propose granting DEEP additional enforcement flexibility by allowing them to, 1, conditionally approve stewardship plans, and 2, exercise discretion when needed. Nothing in our proposal would require the department to exercise either authority, though both are aligned with how they currently operate in overseeing other stewardship laws. As you know, Connecticut is leading the way on EPR for tires, and as other states consider following your lead and using your law as a template, we would like the statute to reflect how the program is operating. I hope it's come through in my testimony, but I want to be very clear. Our industry is not seeking to pare back this law in any way. What I'm asking for today is all we intend to ask for. We're not pursuing any floor amendments beyond what I've testified right now. We've appreciated the open dialogue we've had with this committee, and we look forward to developing the country's first tire stewardship organization with the support of and input from this body, as well as DEEP, municipalities, businesses, and other stakeholders across the state. Really appreciate your time today. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Sean. Good to see you in person, rather than via Zoom. Any questions from anyone in the room? I don't see any virtually as well, but you did you? Oh, Representative O'Day, you got to be faster than that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And Sean, thank you for your testimony. And, the requested minor revisions sound reasonable. I guess from a financial standpoint, I did hear that there was some concerns from the towns about getting the money. What are you hearing from the financial aspect of things?
I was a little surprised to see the testimony that was submitted by the towns. I don't know if it's clear to them that under the law, they're required to get free service from the Tire Stewardship Organization. That's the way the stewardship laws have worked for other waste streams, mattresses, and paints. And that's how we will, that's the service that our TSO will provide to the towns as well.
All right. Appreciate it. And thank you for submitting the written testimony as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else with any comments or questions? And you did have the 2.5 amendments in your extra in your electronic testimony for us to look over, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. Great. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Next is Lindsay Setti, followed by Eric Nelson.
Good afternoon, Chairman Gresko, Chairman Lopes, Ranking Member Callahan, esteemed members of the committee. My name is Lindsay Setti. I am with the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. I've submitted testimony on several different bills. I'm going to use my time today to talk about House Bill 5351, 5352, 5353, which all pertain to extended producer responsibility programs. And CCM's Director of Public Policy, Brian O'Connor, is going to speak to Senate Bill 293 after me. CCM appreciates the committee's efforts to establish EPRs that provide for a responsible method of financing and managing products at their end of life stage that take the financial and administrative burden of their reuse, recycling, energy recovery, or disposal off the back of local governments. To that end, CCM supports House Bill 5351, which would authorize DEEP to conduct a study on the viability of establishing an EPR program for carpets in Connecticut. On HB 5352, Section 2 of the bill reduces the allowable administrative fees that DEEP may assess to any tire stewardship organization from 10% to 5% of total program costs. CCM respectfully requests an amendment to the proposed language so that half, 2.5%, of that administrative fee that DEEP collects from the Tire Stewardship Organization be distributed to municipalities to help offset the costs of handling these products at the local level. Providing municipalities with financial support through Connecticut's Tire Stewardship Program will further strengthen this environmentally responsible system that seeks to take the burden of end-of-life disposal for tires off the backs of local governments. On House Bill 5353, this bill enables a gas cylinder stewardship organization to sue a non-compliant producer when certain costs are incurred by the organization. The bill gives DEEP protections from being a participant, party, or required to provide assistance in any suit brought by the stewardship organization. And CCM just respectfully requests that we look at giving this same legal protection that's being given to DEEP in this bill to potentially be extended to municipalities as they serve as intermediaries in the handling and processing of gas cylinders as part of the stewardship program. Thank you for your time, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lindsay. I did have a question concerning your proposed amendment, the 2.5% going to municipalities from the entire stewardship. So this would be, since the original bill says we're going from 10% to 5%, which portion of that do you want the 2.5% to come from?
From that 5%.
Okay. And then who would you envision admitting that, since hopefully every municipality will have the ability to have a drop off?
That would be from DEEP, coming down from DEEP into the municipalities.
Okay. That were my two questions. Anyone else here with any questions? I don't see any online either. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Next is Eric Nelson, followed by Brian O'Connor.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. Just checking to make sure you can hear me okay.
Affirmative.
Okay, great. My name is Eric Nelson. I run the West Coast carpet collection and recycling business for an Italian company called Aquafil. I'm here today to talk about HB 5351, the study on carpet extended producer responsibility. Just one metric to start off with, and I'll try to make my comments brief. Each year, there are 4 billion pounds of old carpet that goes into landfills in the United States. It's an alarming number. I'll say that again. Each year, there are 4 billion pounds of old carpet that go into our landfills in the United States, which is really a shame because carpet is indeed plastics in a different format, and there is the technical ability to recycle this material. Aquafil is one of the largest global nylon producers. We have fully developed business in Europe, Asia, North America. We manufacture nylon for the automobile, textile, apparel, and engineered plastics industries, as well as our largest market, which is nylon fibers for the global manufacturing, carpet manufacturing industry. We also happen to be one of the largest nylon recyclers in the world. Our signature product, ECONYL, is made from 100% recycled content and can be repeatedly recycled over and over again. We source a lot of nylon waste from around the world to feed our system, including plastic waste, commercial fishing nets, and increasingly post-consumer carpet. We have 5 facilities that I manage focused on collection, sorting, and processing post-consumer carpet from California with an annual capacity of around 35 million pounds. The nylon that we harvest from this process is critically important to our circular supply chain, allowing us to continue to meet the increasing demand for ECONYL. Why California? The carpet stewardship program in California is unique, as has already been discussed in this meeting today. It's the only one of its kind in the entire world. It was originally passed in 2010, implemented in July 1st of 2011, so we're approaching its 13-year anniversary. When we decided to invest in a carpet recycling infrastructure, our research pointed us to the obvious place. The California program provides subsidies on every pound that we collect and recycle. These subsidies are critical for allowing us to have a viable recycling business. This is a very costly business to run with high capital costs and high labor costs. And without these subsidies, we would not have invested. Obviously, California is a big state. It accounts for roughly 10% of the U.S. economy. And I'll leave you with one important metric that has been mentioned before, and it's really the single most important metric. Each year since 2011, the recycling rate for recycling carpet in California has increased, and last year it reached almost 40%. In the other 49 states, the recycling rate for old carpet is less than 5% and going down. thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Eric. You have a way to contact you in your electronic testimony?
Yes, of course.
Would you be willing to sit on a working group going forward to see if, I guess the biggest question for me is whether or not Connecticut is even going to have enough volume of recycled carpets to make it worthwhile. So
I think that's an important question, and I think based on the population of Connecticut, it would seem like that you would. But this is an important topic that the study hopefully would glean some light on.
Thank you, Eric. Anyone with any Representative Dubinsky?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming in. It sounds like your business is very interesting, and your resume fairly extensive. I didn't really hear much about your comments on the bill. It certainly sounds like what you're doing is great stuff. What do you think about this bill?
Well, the bill itself, the main part of the bill, as I understand it, is to conduct a study to see if the right conditions exist for carpet EPR. And in particular, is there enough volume to support this type of program? Connecticut is a fairly populous and condensed state, and would seem to lend itself to think that this type of legislation could be successful in promoting the carpet recycling industry in your state.
When your company started in California, did the California legislature get involved in determining the market viability of your business, or did you do that?
No, the California bill passed in it was implemented in July of 2011. We did not become involved in the state of California until 6 years after that. So we just took a look at the landscape for our personal needs, and that is harvesting post-consumer nylon from carpet, and where should we invest? And that was definitely the obvious place for us to invest to grow our circular economy business.
What was the California bill? Was it similar to the bill that we're considering?
I mean, it's a complicated program. California is a big state and has it funds subsidies for 3 different levels: the collection activity, the processing activity, and the manufacturing of new products activity. And so these are details that would all have to be fleshed out when the extended producer responsibility details are written into the legislation, which I don't think we're quite there yet with this particular bill.
Got it. Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Seeing no other hands raised, thank you very much, Eric, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks for hearing me.
Next is Brian O'Connor, followed by David Bender. Do you remember how to work that?
Is that okay? And actually, before I start, I was Environment Committee clerk back in the late 90s. And one of the things that I find interesting is that one of the big bills at the time, Representative Piscopo, and I know was on the committee back then too, is nuisance wildlife. And here you are talking about feral pigs and swine going around. So more things change, the more they stay the same. So Senator Lopes, Representative Gresco, Republican Leader Harding, Representative Callahan, and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Brian O'Connor. I'm the Director of Public Policy for CCM. I'm speaking here in support of Senate Bill 293. one of the things that are one of the most pressing issues facing municipalities is solid waste management. And I think in light of, the mirror closing, whether or not we expand the 4 trash to energy plants or cite a 5th one, we're trying to make some incremental steps. So under the leadership of our president, Mayor Laura Hoydick from Stratford, we formed a solid waste management committee, and we came up with the proposal that you see before you today. The first thing that we're focused on is the waste characterization study that would be under the administration of DEEP, but conducted by an independent third party. I think one of the most important things that we're looking for there is to kind of get a snapshot of what's happening in Connecticut with both the composition and the tonnage of our solid waste. The last study was done 9 years ago, and I think a lot has changed since then, not only because of the pandemic, but just behaviors have changed, technology has changed within the waste management industry. It would be a good idea before we make any holistic changes or systemic changes, which I anticipate will be occurring next year, or at least being discussed, that we put this group together, find out what we have before us, so we support that as well. And the second part of the bill is increasing the weight limits for hauling of solid waste from 80,000 pounds to 100,000 pounds, which would allow the increase of materials per trip. Now, I know some of the concerns that people have, whether it's be public safety or how it might impact our roads. You have to recall that during the pandemic, the DOT commissioner waived that requirement and allowed these trucks to carry that amount of waste. And I think one of the important things about that is that we didn't really have too many issues with it as far from what I understand. Our neighbors do it, Massachusetts and New York. So again, we think this will also provide some environmental benefits, less trucks on the road, less burning of gas, and also just being able to handle more of our waste and hopefully manage some of our tipping fees. So at this point in time, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Brian. Any Representative Reddington Hughes?
My question has to do with the weight of the trucks, because there seems to be a push in the state of Connecticut to encourage electric vehicles. Is that weight including the weight of the vehicle, or is that in addition to? Because the weight of electric vehicles is much more than what the vehicles are right now.
That's correct. I think that's a fair point that you bring up. Right now, current law is 80,000 pounds. We're proposing to increase it to 100,000. So if you do have an electric vehicle, that would count toward that weight.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Brian? I just had a question as far as you had mentioned in your testimony about potential expansion of the 4 waste to energy plants that we have in the state of Connecticut already. Does CCM envision or would they be open to the idea of different technology, preferably advanced technology, rather than having to expand on or build another burn plant?
Good question. I think, looking at our president's solid waste task force, that's actually one of the things we're looking at. We plan on bringing in gasification companies to see if that might be a solution. So we're not wedded to expanding the plants, but it is something that we are contemplating at this point in time.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, Brian, thank you. Good seeing you again.
Good seeing you. Thank you.
Next is David Bender, followed by John Filczak.
Distinguished members of the committee, I want to thank you for your time this morning, or I should say this afternoon at this point. My name is David Bender. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Circular Polymers. Circular Polymers is one of the largest carpet recyclers in North America. First and foremost, I was born in Connecticut and lived there through my early adult life. While I no longer live there now, I have incredibly fond memories and still have family living in the state, and certainly enjoy visiting. In regards to circular polymers, we are a recycler and manufacturer in Lincoln, California, which is northeast of Sacramento. We have 150,000 square foot facility there. I think Mr. Nelson already talked about the fact that 4 billion pounds of carpet goes to landfill every year. Carpet these days, okay, carpet now versus when I was a kid is simply plastic, sand, and glue. And it's an item that certainly can be recycled back into the circular economy with tremendous benefits for our planet, as well as the solid waste challenge that exists in the state and helping to reduce the solid waste challenge. A little bit about carpet recycling is the fact that it really is a shovel ready, because we have the out of home solved, we have the recycling technology solved, and the end market solved. And that's because we've been working at this now for many years, given the California situation. What's missing in Connecticut is public policy. And public policy is required because the cost to recycle it and get it back into the circular economy exceeds the market price today. And while it's not substantial, it's still required. New York recently passed a carpet recycling law, which goes into effect in the middle of 2026. And all of a sudden now, you know, I certainly agree with doing a study bill first. I'm here to support 5351 that may lead to an EPR bill for carpet in the state of Connecticut. But the reality here is we're looking to bring jobs to the state of Connecticut. We look forward to being able to recycle the carpet, not just in New York, but also in Connecticut. I certainly believe others besides ourselves will open up in Connecticut. But even if this were simply collecting and consolidating, the reality is that today we collect carpet from, you know, hundreds of miles away. So even if there was simply a plant in New York, the reality is whether it's, you know, Norwich, New London, or Putnam, you know, getting all of that carpet into a manufacturing and major recycling entity is a much shorter distance than what happens today throughout the state by myself and other recyclers. Having
Mr.
said
Bender,
that,
I think
sorry.
we have Representative Callahan with a question for you.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you said New York passed it, and obviously there's something on the table here to do a study, how's it paid for? Would you envision a fee? How's it going to work over there?
In the New York legislation, the cost is there is not a cost to the consumers. The cost is paid for by the industry. That's how New York works.
Simple question, simple answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Bender? We'll check online. I don't see any. Thank you very much for your testimony. I believe, oh, sorry, Representative Dubitsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Bender, for coming in. What is preventing you from opening a plant out here now?
It's a great question. The primary challenge is one of economics. The capital required to put a plant in, the conversion cost requires it's a greater cost than one can derive from all of the different polymers that exist within carpet. So there is a small negative value equation that exists, and it comes down to economics. Policy is required. You heard from CRI, the Carpet and Rug Institute, Jen, who talked about the fact that the they just closed the plant in New Jersey by somebody who tried to do it without policy. This is why policy is unfortunately necessary.
Now, when you say policy, you mean government subsidies?
In this case, I'm referring to subsidies from the manufacturers, not from the state.
Okay, well, subsidies from compelled subsidies, we would be compelling the manufacturers to pay into a fund that would fund your operation.
It would fund all operations, including ours. I will also say that I believe that will lead to more design for recyclability. The carpet industry does a tremendous job today of designing carpet for performance and fashion, and but we certainly hope that design includes more and more for end of life and recycling. And I believe one day in the future, I hope that subsidies aren't required, but unfortunately today they are, and we have a environmental challenge and we have a solid waste problem. And all we're asking for right now is all the bill is asking for right now is a study to look at that.
And do you have any idea what the increase in cost for carpet is in places that have these subsidies?
I don't think I'm qualified to answer you. I don't think I'm qualified to answer your question. And I think that would be an appropriate thing for the study to look at.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Brendan Hughes, please.
Oh, thank you. My question is pertaining to hand knotted rugs. So would they be included in this? I mean, I'm an antique Persian rug dealer, so our recycling is usually reselling. I'm just curious as to what that would mean to the hand knotted rug industry.
It's a great question. Okay, so first and foremost, from an environmental perspective, and again, I think there's more people within DEEP who are better able to answer that. Reuse is at the top of the list. Whenever reuse can happen, that's the preferred method. And in fact, both California and New York have put in reuse goals, not just recycling. So that's number one. Secondly, rugs aren't part of the current legislation. It's strictly wall-to-wall carpet, and there's a specific definition to each of those states that I apologize I cannot give you. But right now, rugs are not included.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further questions, thank you very much for your testimony. I would just bear in mind Representative Gresco might be reaching out to you in the future.
Thank you for your time, everyone.
Next person, John Filchek, followed by Frank DeFelice.
Good afternoon, members of the Environment Committee. My name is John Filchak. I'm the Executive Director of the Northeastern Connecticut Council of Governments. I'm here today to testify in support of Senate Bill 296 dealing with roaming livestock. The Northeast Council of Governments, or NECOG, we operate the largest regional animal control program in the state, covering 21 towns, both tribal nations, and some services for the subbase. So on a routine basis, we're dealing with a range of issues, including roaming animals, mostly dogs, but the livestock issue does come up, and the change you made to the statute last year has helped us quite a bit. And I'll have to say, in most cases, the threat of a fine is enough to resolve the problem, and we don't have to go to a formal ticket process. You've heard a lot of discussion or talk today about the town of Sterling. In that situation, we've issued 32 tickets and 352 counts, violations. And that's in my written testimony. Since I submitted that, I found out that the court has nollied 27 of those tickets. I'm not sure how many of the counts that involves, but that's fairly typical of what happens with most of our enforcement operations is they never materialize the resolution in the court and get tossed out, which is an ongoing frustration to us. So we're pleased that you're taking the task force approach because we honestly don't know what we would change in the statute. We do suggest in our testimony that perhaps some form of mandatory mediation might be appropriate. Other states do this, and it seems to work. There was voluntary mediation attempted in the Sterling case. That failed to materialize because we couldn't get one of the parties to the table. But we continue to work on that case, and we're hopeful that this task force can have a positive impact. We have suggested that some language changes happen to this so that there's representation from an animal control, either municipal or regional group, and that we get that you put a farmer on there or somebody involved in actually producing livestock that would have better firsthand knowledge of these issues. I
Hi,
thank
John,
you.
your
I'm
timer
happy to
went
answer
off.
any questions.
Sure. Any questions for Ms. Filczek? Representative Dubitsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thanks, John, for coming in. I was going to ask you what the status was in court, but I think you've already told us. I don't understand the tickets being nollied. Are you talking about a civil fine or a criminal summons?
Talking about the criminal fine that's part of the violation process where we issue the infraction.
Okay. Are you in any way involved in trying to enforce any of this civilly? So
No.
in the same way that a zoning enforcement officer would issue a ticket and then bring it to court?
We have not.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate your supporting this task force. Hopefully we can get all the geniuses together in one room and come up with a solution to this thing. It may be that you already have all the power you need. You just don't know it. It may also be that we require, or you require, or somebody requires some additional legislative authority. But hopefully we can figure it out in this task force. And I appreciate your coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any Representative Reddington Hughes?
Quick question. I just wanted to know if there was at any level a desire to look at this as a disease management program so that the other animals that were in that area would not be affected. I didn't know if they had ever looked at coming at it from that angle.
I know that the Department of Agriculture, I believe the State Department of Health and USDA, including the state veterinarian, and others were taking a hard look at what if there were any threat to either human or animal health as a result of these roaming animals. We had confiscated 5 piglets that were roaming and had them in custody. Those were the only pigs that we took in, and those were fully tested, and we held those for I think close to 4 months until I had to get permission because they were getting too big for our kennel to adopt them out, and they were adopted out and deemed to be no threat in terms of public health or animal health. So I'm not
Thank you.
aware of any problem as far as that goes.
I just thought that they were endangering other farm animals that were in that area, that were, in danger of getting bitten and other things by these pigs. Thanks.
I mean, that I think was a concern, and that is always a possibility. But at least from the testing that I'm aware of, that was not deemed to be an issue.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. I don't see a Frank DeFelice anywhere. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, we're going to move on to Louis Dubuque.
There we go. Sorry about that. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Chairs Lopes and Gresco and Environmental Committee members. I'm Lou Dubuque, and I'm testifying on behalf of the National Waste and Recycling Association's Connecticut chapter. I'm here today in support of certain provisions contained within Senate Bill 293, specifically the requirement that a waste characterization study be performed, and the provisions which will amend current statute to increase certain transportation weight limits for vehicles hauling solid waste. NWRA supports without reservation the requirement that DEEP update the current waste characterization study, or in the alternative, perform a new one. Everyone would agree that up-to-date data are vitally important before making any determinations about the state of Connecticut's waste and recycling systems. It's essential that when the General Assembly, as the body responsible for developing the future path of waste and recycling management, have available to it data that are current as opposed to data that's stale and outdated. After all, these decisions will be used to define for the next 10 years. Do policymakers wish to rely on data that's already 10 years old? The bill also requires that a needs assessment be performed. We submit that such an assessment should be postponed until completion of the waste characterization study, which we believe will be enlightening on a number of fronts. In 2016, CMMS DEEP stated that, quote, waste composition will be measured through sampling every 3 to 5 years. These studies provide meaningful data on the actual characteristics and composition of waste. Of particular relevance to the planning and program evaluation is the nature and amount of recyclable materials found in disposed waste. This data can be used to assess the effectiveness of curbside recycling programs, food scrap diversion programs, C&D recycling, reuse, and other key priorities of this strategy. DEEP will conduct these studies at regular intervals, unquote. On the issue of weights, NWRA also supports this proposal as it has over the course of the last several years. Despite this proposal having been made on several occasions, those who oppose the measure suggest that the public will be placed at risk by an increase. NWRA and its members certainly do not wish to place anyone at risk. However, as the committee will recall, during COVID, the Lamont administration allowed for the increase in truck weights. During this period, there were no accidents that were the result of the increase, and we respectfully submit that the experience is a strong rebuttal to these arguments. Moreover, an increase in truck weights creates the necessary parity with each of our surrounding states and provides immeasurable environmental benefits by fostering a reduction in vehicle emissions. NWRA is pleased to support these measures as provided in SB 293 and is happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thanks, Lou. Any questions, Mr. Dubuque? I don't see any, so thank you very much for testifying again.
Thank you. Sorry.
Tim Hollister, followed by David Fleming.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. My name is Tim Hollister. As some of you know, I am a land use and environmental attorney at Hinckley Allen in Hartford, but I'm speaking today as an owner of property on Beach Pond in Voluntown. I've spent 62 of my 67 years in Voluntown and specifically on Beach Pond, where my family's either rented a cabin or owned property. And as you heard, 2/3 of Beach Pond is in Connecticut, but 1/3 is in Rhode Island. So I'm supporting House Bill 5350. I did submit written testimony, but I'll just very briefly summarize. In 2015, the Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management had the very bad idea to put in a boat ramp and parking spaces at the east end of the pond And then, and I'm being respectful as I can be, but at that point, they basically absolved themselves of any responsibility for safety and management, and that has been the problem. Ever since the ramp was constructed on summer weekends, the pond has been overrun by jet skiers who ignore the safe boating rules, especially the rule about going less than 6 miles an hour and within 100 feet of the shoreline, which is what we have on the west end of the pond where my family property is located. And frankly, just to be graphic about it, when we signal the violators to slow down and obey the law, we are greeted with middle fingers and F-bombs. And it's just, it's insulting, it's tragic. For generations, families have swum freely, kayaked, sailed on Beach Pond. You do it these days on a summer weekend, you take your life in your hands. So I want to thank First Selectman Hansen, Representative Lemieux, for bringing this bill forward. Our law enforcement need every tool they can possibly have in order to enforce the safe boating laws. This clarification, and I was frankly surprised that this clarification was even needed, but it's very clear that it is needed, and I hope you'll support that bill. Two other quick things before I finish. There was testimony about the state line being invisible. Anybody who's been on the pond knows exactly where the Rhode Island Connecticut state line is. There's a bridge on 165 that marks the southern end, and you can very easily figure it out. And, you know, I understand DEP, you know, tries their best with limited resources. There was a question about how many days is DEP on the pond. The answer is in the last several years, less than 7 per summer. So they're doing their best, but we clearly need a much more comprehensive answer. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Perfect timing, Mr. Hollister. Any questions for Mr. Hollister? I'm not seeing any. Thank you for testifying.
Thank you.
David Fleming? Nope. Moving on to Lori Brown. Moving on even quicker to Chase Lind. Wow. Peter Hargraves. No? Oh, there he is.
Perfect. Sorry about that. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present regarding House Bill 5353, an act concerning the gas cylinders program. My name is Peter Hargrave, and I'm presenting on behalf of the Pressurized Cylinder Industry Association. Thank you very much for Representative Gresco for bringing forward this legislation. Since the initial EPR legislation was brought forward for gas cylinders, leading gas cylinder brands have been working diligently to develop a stewardship organization to submit a program plan and to staff and resource themselves to meet the implementation date of October 2025. We've made good progress and very thankful for the support we've had from the current members, from DEEP, and certainly from municipalities as well. Our members do, however, have some concerns, particularly as it relates to ensuring fairness. While several of the more well-known and responsible companies have stepped up, there still are a number of companies that have not. Unlike some of the other states' producer responsibility programs, this bill does not require visible point-of-sale fees, which creates an additional challenge in ensuring participation, particularly from those brands that are not in the United States. Some gas cylinders are predominantly sold through convenience stores and other small businesses that makes compliance activities even more challenging. As there is a relatively high fee to establish the first-in-the-nation program, many of our members are concerned that they're going to be priced out of the marketplace as they will have to try to compete against non-compliant organizations. To address these concerns, we have proposed a number of changes to enable DEEP to conduct more effective enforcement activities and help to ensure those compliant companies are not at a competitive disadvantage. So we asked for ensuring compliance actions can be taken in advance of implementation of the program. Costs are already adding up to pay for the work being done currently to get everything up and running in 2025. Ensuring that retailers and distributors also have an obligation to review the list of compliant brands and only sell those brands that are compliant within the state. Otherwise, there's the concern that retailers can import non-compliant overseas brands into Connecticut and do so without consequence. We want to ensure the law does not inadvertently hurt U.S. companies. Allow for the enforcement actions to be taken by the Attorney General's office to bolster compliance and enforcement activities, and so that the funds raised by civil penalties can be used for additional administration and enforcement activities. Finally, provide the stewardship organization with the private right of action to address costs associated with producers who are not compliant. So these activities have been informed, or these asks have been informed by other jurisdictions, and what is working and what is effective to bring non-compliant producers into the program. Of the items requested, only the last was included in the proposed bill. So we certainly appreciate Representative Gresco for bringing the legislation forward in a very short timeline. We support the intent, and we really do hope that there might be an opportunity to build upon what is in the current legislation with some of the other examples we have brought forward. If additional compliance requirements are not adopted in this session, we would ask that implementation of the program be delayed, as we are significantly concerned about some of the market impacts for those compliant members. Thank you for the opportunity again.
Thank you.
And happy to answer any questions.
Representative Gresco.
Thank you. Peter, the additional amendments that you suggested are in your electronic testimony?
Correct, they are, yes.
Okay. We will definitely take a look at it, but look, the state appreciates your assistance in getting this cylinder bill over the finish line. So we will definitely take a look at your suggestions, and we appreciate your willingness to continue to assist us in getting this right.
Thanks so much.
Any further questions? Seeing none, I thank you for your testimony. The last person I have on the list is Mr. Randolph, who I don't see. All right, our hearing is concluded for today. Thank you very much, everybody.
Wait a minute.
Oh, what now?
So, Mr. Clerk, do we have all the votes from our committee meeting? He hasn't voted? Okay. So, to my co-chair's point, the public hearing is concluded. However, our votes are being held open until the last person votes, or 4 p.m. on this virtual link. So if you haven't voted, please stay on and make sure to record your votes appropriately. Thank you.